Hello, everybody. My name is Leslie Heffel. I'm the Assistant Director of Student and Alumni Affairs at the School of Social Work. I'm here today in place of Mike McCaw, who had to run that real quick, that's why his name is on your program. But I wanted to introduce you to several doctoral students here at the school who are going to talk about their journey from how they got from being undergrad and master's students to doctoral students. So I'm going to start with Emmy.
Hi, I'm Emmy Titterington. I am a PhD candidate here at Silver. I guess I'm in my fourth year. I can't even keep track of where I am in the program. I'm all but dissertation, working on my dissertation right now, and I'm a research scientist on an NIH-funded R01 study on mental health recovery for people with serious mental illness and supportive housing. I teach social welfare policies, programs and policies, one in the BSW program, and have been a practicing social worker since I was many years ago. Since 2004 I got my master's.
Hi, my name is Jeff Steen. I'm in, the third year of my doctoral studies. I'm taking my final two classes right now. I'll begin the comprehensive exams in a couple months and start the dissertation proposal in the fall. I am working on two studies right now that my mentor and I are getting started through the National Association of Social Workers, studying social work history and policy, and specifically in regards to substance abuse. So one of the projects is on substance abuse practice and policy. I worked in the field for about 10 years. I graduated in 2001 from my MSW program. I was also a BSW student, so for those of you who are sort of doing advanced standing option, I was one of those people. And yeah, I'm glad to be here today.
I'm Diana. I guess I'm the newcomer. I'm a first-year doctoral student, and I combine my coursework currently with I'm a part-time social worker at the Puerto Rican Family Institute. My main research interests are community, drug-related community violence, familial social capital, and mental health outcomes in children, and I'm still trying to figure out the whole aspect of publishing things and participating in studies, so it's all up and coming.
Great. So let's start from the beginning. When did you figure out that you wanted to pursue a doctoral degree in social work, and then what did you do?
I'll tell a story around this. I had been working in the field since I was about 19 in various capacities in shelters and on the street with folks and lots of different agencies, and went and got my master's in 2002, graduated in 2004, moved to New York and started working in intensive case management and supportive housing. I worked originally out of a behavioral health program at Jersey City Medical Center, and I was getting frustrated by the barriers within my clinical work that I was encountering in services, and I felt like I could continue to move up within this agency and maybe affect change on agency-wide policies at best, but I was not able to affect change on access to resources on the level that I really needed in order to feel like I was getting people that I was working with what they actually needed to survive. And that was incredibly frustrating to me, so I decided to start researching and asking people what their experiences in the PhD program was in social work, because I wasn't sure if that was the route to go either. I didn't know if that would help me affect change, and that was my main goal in getting my doctorate, if that was what was going to help that. So I knew the only person that I knew who had a PhD in social work was the director of the behavioral health program at this medical center, and so I said, can I take you out to lunch at the hospital, cafeteria, and buy you salad, and we'll sit and chat about PhD programs in New York. And he was open to doing that, and we sat down, and he was very confused of why I wanted a PhD, and he asked me, as a woman, maybe you want to do other things with your life, and would this interrupt these things? Maybe you want to consider what your future would be like, and all these other questions. And he said, well, what do you really want to do? What's the point of getting a PhD for you? And I said, well, I want to be in your seat one day. I want to be where you are, and you seem to have managed to juggle a family and your career and a PhD. And he was a little taken aback by that. So that, I think, empowered and motivated me even more to get it, because there were other people in these positions of power that were affecting change on a larger scale that were out there and able to do it, and I felt like I could do that too. So that's just one little impetus for me getting my PhD.
I think Emma brings up a good point, and I think it's like 75% of all deans in schools of social work are male, which I think is certainly problematic as we think about the sort of gender distribution in undergraduate programs and in master's programs. There's clearly a lot that needs to happen within our profession to work for change. And I think that's one of the reasons that I was particularly interested in starting a doctoral program. Sort of like Emmy mentioned, I'd worked in nonprofit agencies and in hospitals, sort of doing mostly work with folks with chronic mental illness or substance use disorders, and I kind of saw what the rest of my profession might look like. I really had a couple great mentors at the organizations I was working with, who were about 20 or 30 years my senior, and I received my LCSW, and which was kind of a critical step in the process toward more full professional development. And I could sort of see where things could go for me, and I wasn't all that interested in where things could go, because I felt like I wanted to do a whole lot more with my career and with my life. And not in any way sort of suggesting that my mentors were not doing amazing things with their lives, but I know for myself I had to have a different kind of challenge. And since I was a child, like, I've loved writing. Like, as soon as I was able to write, I was like writing books and stories, and I've always had a mind that just thinks about lots of things all the time. And so I thought about doctoral studies for a while, and actually made a segue back in Chicago, where I had moved here from, to becoming an admissions director at a school of social work. And I did that for about 3 or 4 years before I moved here. And that gave me a chance to kind of segue into academia and to see kind of the inner workings of an academic institution for better and for worse, which I think there are certainly betters and worses of all institutions, and especially I think in academia. So at any rate, I was teaching as well then. I got a chance to teach practice classes and to see kind of really what it's like in the classroom to be with students, and decided that this is something I really want to do. And so it's something I've not regretted doing. It's certainly been a tremendous challenge, but it's been exactly what I wanted to happen. So.
I think for me, it seems like a natural step. I guess I was sort of in the wrong field. I've been working in research for quite a while. I was senior research assistant at the Brookings Institution, working primarily on issues related to democracy, citizen security, and human rights. And I kind of didn't feel it. I didn't feel the passion that my supervisor and boss at that time felt, and I think like some of them did, talk to some mentors and people that I really found inspiring, and did sort of like a self-assessment of what area, or what were my interests, my real passions and interests, and how could they best be served. And that's how I kind of got into, I didn't have a master's in social work, so I kind of saw it as an investment in order to get the ultimate goal, which was to do a PhD in social work. And another thing is that in working some of these issues related to human rights and violence, I work in Latin American region, particularly in Puerto Rico. I realized there was such a dearth of good data out there. Like, I'm being interested in developing psychosocial and clinical programs. I really could not see myself doing so in a productive and efficient manner if I didn't kind of first really research what were the underlying dynamics and what's really going on before you go out and launch like full-on programs. So I think that was mostly what sparked me.
Great. So now that you're here, what are some skills and experiences that you've had or have that have been critical to your success in this program so far?
Are we going around?
You can go in any order you want.
I think the two things that have served me best since starting have been my ability to schmooze, to network, and a sense of assertiveness and advocating for what I want to get out of the program. I think unlike a master's program, it's much more in your court of what you get out of it, and there's not as much, advisement or assistance in getting it. So you're out there trying to hustle for the kind of program the kind of education that you want, what kind of experience you want, and where you want to go, because there's so many different directions that you could go with it. So I think the ability to be able to access as many different people in the field and talk to lots of people and connect with lots of people has really helped my ability to do well in the program, and hopefully going forward.
Yeah, I think probably determination and support from those I love are kind of the two biggest things that have really helped me. I entered the program sort of with sort of a determination and a mindset that I was not, I'm not going to leave this program. I am going to do this and accomplish this. And actually, I didn't share that right after I received my MSW, I was admitted to University of Chicago's PhD program, and I did about the first year of the PhD there, and at this time I was 22 years old and had never really practiced in the field except for some internships, and decided I didn't really even know much about social work or how to ask the questions that I think are relevant to practice, and so I kind of took a hiatus for 10 years from academia, knowing that I would come back at some point. And so this time around I said I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna, regardless of what happens, I am holding on. So it's been a ride in all kinds of ways that are sort of beautiful and difficult, and I think that's where the support aspect comes in. I moved here from Chicago because I knew that my family and my friends would be a major distraction during a doctoral program, and so I didn't want to have a lot of community of people around me. I knew that I wanted to focus, and I think in some ways that was a very wise decision. In other ways, it was not so wise in that being a doctoral student is incredibly isolating as well, or it's a very solitary experience. And I'm someone who typically and almost always prefers solitary experiences and my own sort of independence. But that being said, there's lots of stresses and lots of situations that will come up that really will require people who understand what you're going through and maybe who've been through that themselves. And so I sometimes have questioned I think maybe I took a step too far in regards to, I don't want to know anybody where I live because I just want to focus. And there was probably a lot of middle ground in between. Yeah, so those have been, I think, the two biggest aspects of that have helped me through the process.
I share some of those. I think it's really important to be very flexible with yourself and very understanding. A lot of the times what I believe PhDs is not really about how talented, smart you are. It's much about how much narcissistic injuries you can sustain. You're going to be hearing a lot of people giving you great feedback, but at the same time there are going to be a lot of people disagreeing with your ideas, and along the lines of what she said. You need to stick sometimes for what you believe in if you feel it's well done. I think it's an important skill, so to have been very, very assertive. Embrace the criticism that comes from a good place and it's constructive, but also be strong enough that you know when to disregard the feedback that it's a hindrance for you. And the other thing for me, I think, is again, networking has been built. This is one of the most beautiful things a PhD program has. Sometimes I'm reading things for my own dissertation, and I'm interested in the work X or Y author is doing. I will email them, just get in contact with someone that you find fascinated. Who knows, maybe they'll respond back to you, maybe they want to work with you, or maybe they know other people. So that has also kind of been incredibly useful and helpful.
So you both mentioned, or at least two of you mentioned, the isolation and the criticism and things like that. So I wanted to know about the role that mentorship plays in your research and in your studies and just generally in your success in this program. and that can be in the program or outside the program.
We all start this one. Just to give you a little chance to think.
Should we go the other way around?
Oh, sure, that'll be fun. Yeah.
I have an incredibly supportive, an extraordinary and beautiful mentor. We have a very transparent and straightforward relationship, and I think, I appreciate someone that supports my ambitions and my goals, but at the same time, she has the ability to let me know, you know what, Diane, I think this objective or this idea that you have in mind might be served in this manner, might be served better in this manner. So I appreciate when she has that honesty. She feels comfortable enough to come to me, and the same me with her, to just let me know when I'm getting too creative or too out of the box. And it's always good to have someone that, I think, like he said, it's difficult, particularly on your first year. You're receiving a wealth of information, and it can feel a tad overwhelming at times. And it's good to have someone that can listen to you, that you can knock on their door anytime, and they'll be there to actively listen to you and kind of guide you through the process. And I've been incredibly blessed with my mentor.
Is your mentor a faculty member here or someone else entirely?
She is a faculty member here full time.
There's some formal within Silver. It depends on the school, but there's hopefully, and Silver just kind of implemented this in a formal way. There's a formal mechanism for mentorship pairing. So when you come into the school, if your work indicates that you would fit best under someone doing the similar work, then they kind of match you up, and that person is your advisor, and you work with them. But that is fairly new, and I think that they put that into place because it's so valuable, and they realized that they needed a more formal mechanism, because a lot of times people aren't jumping in to seek out mentors or having trouble nailing people down.
I definitely sort of echo Emmy's comments. I think when she and I entered the program, there was not a formal mechanism in place through which students could access mentors, and that, I think mentorship is a vital component of doctoral studies. And actually, in one of my mentor's books about doctoral studies, Dr. Anastas, sort of students from the survey that she completed of a survey of doctoral students across the country, suggested that, I think it was maybe the primary, or if not primary, one of the top few moderators of sort of happiness and fulfillment and success in doctoral programs is sort of being able to have mentors that someone worked closely with, and you can receive all kinds of information and support from. So I entered the program a bit haphazardly, I think, as a lot of us probably did, and I was talking to lots of faculty and deciding how to create sort of a faculty sort of network. And I also, my first year in the program, sought out mentorship in Steinhardt, and was working on a project for 1 year there. And so then as the program formalized the mentorship structures, I was able, I think, to benefit from that in some ways, and worked with a faculty member for about a year and a half, and she and I are working on a publication right now from some of that research. And about 6 months ago or so, I shifted to a different mentor, and there's sort of two primary faculty members now that I'm working with, and they've both been folks who I've sought out since the very beginning of my studies, and who have substantive areas of interest that kind of reflect mine, and who have, I think, personality styles, work ethic, certain sorts of values that are important to me, that really kind of reflect who I am as a person. And I think as one navigates through doctoral studies, that's part of the process. Is there's going to be faculty that maybe you have so much in common with in regards to their areas of interest, but you're not going to be able to work with them for whatever reason. I mean, it's or they might not be able to work with you, and so sometimes these pairings can be a bit there can be tension or there can be chaos, but in the midst of that, I think it's important to remember sort of your goals and what you need to get from this process. A really good book I read before I started my doctoral program it's called Getting What You Came For, or Getting What I Came For. I don't remember which pronoun, but it was very valuable. And one of the things the book talks about is a great way to strategize your doctoral program is to see this as an intensive apprenticeship. And I think for me, that's been the most valuable. And through each of these relationships I've had, I've learned a lot. And so I imagine now working with these two mentors through the end of my studies.
Can I just add that as if you do decide to seek out a PhD program, I would strongly advise you to be very go meet with the program director and really get a sense, or at the info sessions or whatever, and really kind of grill them on what kind of mentorship support is available and how formal those connections are, like if they have something in place where they match you up, or if it's on you to kind of seek people out, because people are very busy in academia, and if they don't have a very formal mechanism, it can be more difficult, or you might just be out there flailing. So it's good to kind of use that as an assessment as you're looking at programs. It helps tremendously when you're able to make that connection. And just to piggyback on a little bit what you said, I think mentorship relationships can be complex sometimes, especially in academia where there's not as clear hierarchy as there is in a master's program or something. Like you're becoming colleagues with people, and so this can create weird dynamics and everything, and it's good to not put all your eggs in one basket. I have mentors from other schools that I worked with during my master's program that I seek advice from. I have my boss is my dissertation chair, so we have a very solid relationship, and then I also work with other faculty here publishing papers and working with them. So I'm trying to diversify, just like you would in a good business, diversify, put it out there, so if one thing falls through, you've still got these very strong connections with other faculty.
Yeah, adding to that, I think one of the things that I would recommend that I did for my own application, if do your homework and do a little bit of research, and if there's someone out there that you really like and you want to work with, and just state it clearly. This is what I'm interested in. This person is doing this and that, and luckily for me, it panned out well, and I know for some of my classmates it did as well. So just put a little bit of effort in that part, because it also, if I were reading an application, it makes me feel like, oh, this person's kind of where she's going, so and that kind of helps them also know and see where you are going for, and the kind of mentor that they should be pairing with.
Yeah, and even I think it's important to even sort of meet those possible mentors beforehand, if possible. Like maybe as you're applying for doctoral programs, again, if there are faculty whose research really interests you, go and set up an appointment with them, see how it feels, what it's like to be with them, learn about their research and their kind of research trajectory and what they'll be doing in the next several years, because probably what you've read about in their publications isn't going to necessarily be what they're working on at the moment, because those are from grants that were likely several years ago, and they published from those grants, and all of those processes take a couple years. So the faculty member could very well be working on something very different by the time you might enter the doctoral program. So it's important, I think, to ask sort of what's ahead for someone, because what's ahead is what would be yours during your studies.
Namely, funded stuff.
Yes.
What's
Yes.
ahead
Exactly.
that there's money along with, because one of the challenges is how are you going to get paid and make it through the program, so that helps to know too. Who's got the money?
I just want to take a second to see if anyone has any questions that they want to bring up. You look like you've got a question.
I'm just curious how kind of focused your research ideas you wanted to go into were when you started the program, because I'm pretty broad, a lot of things interest me, and is that really important to kind of figure out before you get started, or how much room is there to move around once you're in the program?
I'll say I had a population of interest, and the kind of service setting that I was interested in just from my practice experience. But I thought I was more focused than I was when I came in. When I came in and I started taking the coursework, then my mind's going all over the place. And I witnessed the same process. And I have a first year cohort member that works on my research team, and I witnessed her going through this process, and I witnessed other people from other cohorts going through it. So maybe it's just a phenomenon that happens when you start the program, you're all kind of oh, but then that's interesting, and this is interesting, and that person's doing this cool thing, and you get really stimulated, and so sometimes people's interests change anyways. So I would know enough to narrow down a program that encompasses something that you're interested in, because if you're way off from what you're interested in at all, then you might not be happy at the program. But it is also a journey, so don't expect to come in like with exactly what you want to do and have that be your dissertation and finish up with that, because it can change quite a bit.
And I think often what you want to do might not even be what you are going to be doing in your doctoral program. I mean, certainly that, as Emmy mentioned, sort of, I imagine like a pinball going through a pinball machine, like we kind of get sort of moved back and forth in all different ways. But also, I mean, but even if you do decide that your area of interest in your specific question remains solid, which I think doesn't probably happen for too many people, still, you're probably not going to be doing too much research in that area, because you're going to want to be working with faculty who are going to be your research mentors, and you're going to be helping them probably with their research, and ideally learning the kinds of skills methodologically and learning more in your substantive areas of interest that are going to support that. But and perhaps in your dissertation, you'll be able to carve out sort of an area of your specific interest, but it has to be very relevant to the work that your mentor, well, it doesn't have to be, but typically it's very relevant to the work that your mentor is also doing. So I often, one of my mentors has said to me, well, it's in your career that you get to then return to your research questions. Like kind of once you graduate, it's when you can kind of go back to the things that you're interested in, because you become an independent researcher and can apply for the grants and the kinds of things that you're interested in. So I think it's great. I think, like Diana had said earlier, it's great to have flexibility in the program and to hold firm to sort of whatever key sort of populations or methodologies or sort of some, principles that you're interested in exploring, but to realize that there's going to be a whole lot that shifts around that.
I was going to ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Would you be able to explain the sort of curriculum throughout the time the program spans, like first year, second year, third year? Is there the sort of established focus for each year, and how much can that vary between your personal interest? And as far as research methods and statistics knowledge, what you learn in school before you start the program, or wherever you had studied prior, compared to the emphasis, obviously, on the research that you do once you're in the program, the sophistication, the difference. And did you have prior research experience going into the program? Because me, I'm the first year, I haven't taken any research. I did some in psych, and if any of you have that background, with compare the different levels of sort of research intensity that you need to really possess.
I think if you're asking about silver specifically, that's one thing, and there's, a very set curriculum that everybody takes, and then you have some electives, but it's real program specific. So this is going to be totally different, and even like whether you do coursework over 2 years or 3 years or they're constantly changing the curriculum and the order of things and where they want to put emphasis. So it's hard to answer that question specifically. I would definitely say, as you're doing research on programs, look that up on the website so you can see the differences between the programs and what would fit best with your interests. As far as research goes, I hate math and science. I think the last time I took math was my sophomore year in high school. I was in art school undergrad, but I did, in my master's program, seek out research opportunities to be research assistant with people so I could pick up, I could have the experience of being on research studies. And the PhD, the DSW is a clinical degree, right? It's to prepare advanced practitioners. PhD, pretty much across the board, even though this is a PhD in clinical social work, you're there to answer scientific questions, right? You're there to ask these questions and to think about the answer. So although it is social science-y, you are usually moving towards, research and developing the science around a particular phenomenon. So it's good to have as much experience in that as possible, but it depends on the program of how much emphasis they put on that and how much they expect from you coming in.
I do want to add, I I know a lot of people tend to get a little bit scared about the quantitative courses. I'm a first year, and trust me, I'm very scared. But I do have to say, it's really a beautiful thing because it's not like isolated math or like you feel like it's no purpose. I think it's very well connected what we're learning to theory creation and knowledge creation, and that makes it really beautiful because you can see, oh, like how these numbers really affect my theory or how this relationship is. So it's not like, and again, it's not like hardcore algebra, or it's very much logic in my opinion. I think it's not intuitive to many of us because we don't do this on a daily basis. But once, and again, be flexible. It takes a little bit of time to grasp some of this statistical and methodological concepts. But once you're able to see like how useful it is and how the impact it can have, I think if you put it in that positive lens, it can definitely reduce that anxiety. Do not to worry. It's not. I'm not a mathematical gal either, and I try to see, it is really beautiful when you see like your model created, and like it's that way I can deal with the math part.
And as Emmy and Diana have both said, definitely do your research before you make application to programs. The Council on Social Work Education, accredits undergraduate and master's programs, and CSWE actually has very specific requirements, especially I think in 2008 they have like the EPASS guidelines that programs must follow. So within, and I'm sure the folks at NYU and other schools would argue with this, but within, I'm adjunct at 2 other schools here in New York. Within schools of social work, there is not a lot of variation in regards to what is taught in the classroom or how it's taught. There's not a lot of variation at the master's level or the undergraduate level because CSW requires so many sort of guidelines that need to be met that programs don't have a lot of wiggle room, and unfortunately not too many programs, I would argue, have a commitment to intense sort of academic rigor, which would take them above and beyond these benchmarks. I think often the benchmarks are met. So that being said, the CSWE does not accredit PhD programs. So that is why there's tremendous fluctuation then in the doctoral programs, because really then the doctoral program becomes the school's only academic degree that it is able to craft in a way that reflects kind of its vision and its mission. So therefore there is tremendous, like Smith College, for example, which is a great, I think it's the only kind of really clinical training school left for a PhD. They have a summer classes where basically folks are doing advanced practice wherever they're living around the world during the year, and they come for an intense 3 or 4 month summer semester in which they're taking their courses, and then they all sort of go back to their jobs, and I think there's some work during the year, but so there's all different models that are in place, and it's important I think to learn about what best reflects kind of your learning style and your priorities at the doctoral level. There's something else I was going to mention. I was like, I really want to tell students this.
Just like
I'll
think of it. Just like in an MSW program, there's culture of the program as well. Like Hunter being like community organizing or macro level versus clinical or micro level. Like the emphasis is different, and so really again educating yourself on the culture of the program, the faculty interests, and how that trickles down into doctoral education. And you can really, really explicitly nail down the program director to articulate that for you in a very, in a paragraph. So they should be able to do that.
I remember what I was going to say now. There are 2 students in my cohort who had received their MSW from NYU, from Silver, and they both said, and continue to say, I feel like I'm in a completely different school. This is nothing like my master's program whatsoever. And they both sort of said that emphatically upon the first semester being complete, and they both still say that at this point. So I think it's important to understand that this is not going to be an extension of your master's program. You're not going to be getting clinical training if you come to NYU or to most schools of social work. I think there are very few schools of social work at this point, although the DSW sort of movement is is taking off and is a cash cow for universities and is going strong, which is DSW is a clinical doctorate, like Emmy mentioned, and those have mostly been dismantled, and they're now coming back to often sit alongside PhD programs as separate degrees. But you are not. This is not going to be an extension of your master's program. It's going to be radically different. You're not going to become intentionally. You're not going to be explicitly trained as a clinician. You might sort of gain some good practice skills along the way, but it's a very different experience.
One more question?
There was some allusion made to this, but I was wondering if you could identify what is the biggest difficulty or challenge about being in the program, and conversely, what is the thing that you've enjoyed most about being in it?
I love creating models. Like, I know math it sucks, but there's something about your own, and even when it's not your own work, it's like someone else's work. I love how, I think it gets at the heart of what a PhD is. Like, if you're really fascinated by how, this research question that has been boggling you, how it really develops into theory, it is a beautiful process. And if you find that attractive, then a PhD type of program is definitely a good fit in that sense. And another thing that I love about the program is I've been blessed enough to have a very supportive, not only cohort members, but I think the administration as well. I came from Columbia, and I feel NYU in that sense, I feel it's more community. I feel like it's more open door policy, and I feel like I am nurtured enough versus in other academic settings that I've been in. So those have been good things about the program.
I think, my biggest sort of joy has been the freedom to explore what interests me. I mean, sometimes as I get really stressed, I look around myself and I'm surrounded by like books and like doing reading some of my favorite authors and like engaging in some ideas that are just beautiful. I'm like, as stressful as all this is, I mean, what a luxury. I mean, it really is a tremendous privilege.
And a privilege to read Foucault, like,
and
not be like,
yeah, exactly.
Not as your fun reading or something.
Exactly. And in some ways, I mean, it's part of your process, which is really beautiful. Conversely, what's not so beautiful is you often don't get paid for all the work that you're doing. And so I think finances has been, I mean, for me, and it continues to be the greatest struggle. It's, I'd worked in the field for about 10 years, and even though as social workers we don't make much money, it's about like a 75% pay cut in order to begin doctoral studies, and I'm still just scraping by the semester. I'm teaching as an adjunct at 3 schools of social work, 3 different classes located in 3 different parts of the greater New York area, and I'm taking 2 classes, and I'm involved in 4 research projects, and I still am not making ends meet. And I live on Staten Island in like in a basement, so I have like really low rent. So it's like in a very simple life, and I'm still scraping by, and so it depends. Again, I think that's been the struggle, and that certainly though programs. I know our program here is working to. Certainly funding has increased a lot since Emmy and I started. It's continuing to do so, and they hope to extend funding sort of years 3 and 4 and have more generous packages, and and some schools don't offer any funding, so I'm certainly not complaining.
Yet another reason to do your research.
Absolutely.
I
met with an MSW student from a class I taught just a couple weeks ago, and she has been applying and interested in only one school of social work here in the New York area, and that's the only school that she's really researched. She did not know that at NYU and Columbia we get a funding package, and at this school that she's interested in, there's no funding offered whatsoever, and in fact she would have to pay her tuition as a PhD student. And as a doctoral student, I think that you should never pay for tuition, and the school should be paying you, and that's what the good universities do, and that's really the way the model is set up. That being said, you're probably still going to be scraping by to make ends meet.
And I would echo everything that they said about challenges and the benefits. And then I would also just add that as someone who worked in the field for a long time and in with challenging populations and in difficult areas of practice, I feel really privileged to not have to worry about finding someone dead in their room, and rather like, now I'm worried about getting a paper in on time or something. And I always, when people stress out about, publishing papers or something, I'm like, nobody's gonna die if the paper stinks. Like, you're gonna be fine, and that's, I think, the perspective that is unique to social work, because our jobs are very stressful. And when you're out post MSW working, chances are you're in a rather stressful position. And as hard as the PhD program is, I can't even compare it to what clinical work can be sometimes. So it's a privilege to be able to think intellectually about things and have this experience, and to have such a different level of stress. That's the best way I can put it, I guess.
When you guys were talking earlier about research every program, and each program is different, could you guys speak to what is the silver PhD program? Because you guys know it well. How would you characterize it? What makes it unique? And I mean, you can talk out of turn if you
Well, I'll speak to this a little bit, since I've been around the longest and seen a very drastic change. It's actually changed quite a bit within the past 10 years, but even more so within the past 2-3 years. There's a move even farther away from the clinical focus. I think when I came in, they were like, this is evidence-based practice, practice-based evidence. That's what we're trying to balance here, and promote both. And I think that it's swinging a little bit more towards the evidence base for practice, so the research and research heavy, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I like that there's this marriage of practice and research here, but in order to be competitive, realistically, in order to be competitive and to go out onto the job market and get a job in academia afterwards, if you're not prepared, published, showing that you know research, you're gonna have a very difficult time on the job market. And I think that a lot of people at Silver have notoriously had a difficult time on the job market post-masters, getting into the better positions in academia. And now I think with your cohort and moving along to our cohorts, there's been more support. It's been giving people the skills that they need and the publications that they need to get out there. But it's drastically different than it was. So it will probably move more in that direction. It's hard to say.
I mean, being in the first year, I've experienced seeing the other side of changes. I know for a fact, I feel so, to the extent that I can in the first year, very solid about my methodological skills. I think they brought in incredibly talented faculty members from other universities who were teaching cutting edge techniques on statistical analysis and methodological analysis that even like I say before, I'm not necessarily the most quantitative or mathematical person, but the way it's been taught, it flows, it looks very organic to me, it flows well, and it seems there's a continuity. Your first semester, you take the first basic stats course, and then you have the option of taking a second thing, builds upon, so that, and I think, like she said, theory and practice, but the reality is that for the job market in academia, you really need to be strong about your methodology and your method. So I think I appreciate that in this program as of right now.
I think mentorship is sort of one key element of the program that I think distinguishes our program from another. And again, that's been put in place just over the last couple of years. There are lots of schools of social work where there isn't a formal mentor relationship that's established. And I know that our program director really values sort of the process of mentorship. And I think, again, that's invaluable, and it's something to be looking for as you explore programs.
Is working in academia the typical route that you take after having graduated from this program? Oh, that's my first question. The second one is, when you mentioned that you had to be ready for just a wide variety of criticism, what type of criticism might you receive being in this program? What are the different pressures?
Well, I'll give it a stab first. In regards to what you would do after your degree, when I entered, which was again about 3.5, God, 3 years ago maybe. I lose track of time. I remember very well at our orientation, we went around the group and each of us said what we imagined we might want to do upon the completion of our PhD. And I said, I think I might want to be like at a teaching college and doing some practice and teaching. And about half of my cohort wanted to go back to practice, and a couple students also thought they might want to go into academia, but certainly not sort of looking for the R1 or the top research universities. And this is a tremendous shift. And so now while there is certainly always a multiplicity of outcomes, and I think that the program is talks about that, I think the hope is that you are getting these methodological skills and you're getting groomed to enter into academia to compete at top universities, and that is the goal of the program, is to get a job at a top 10 Research One university. So I think gone are the days when students can say, I want to be a practitioner, or maybe I want to teach as an adjunct part-time. I think most students in my cohort wouldn't have been admitted to the program now, not because we lacked academic sort of thoughtfulness or because we weren't great practitioners, but because the discord would have been too great.
There's not a payoff for the university if you go out and just become an adjunct. Then they don't get to say, this person went to this school. Like, there needs to be an exchange, and a lot of schools want to see that there will be an exchange. And
so I say that because I think it's very important to be clear about that up front. That being said, there's room to there's agency in the process, and also this is in no way an indicative, I think, of a shortcoming by NYU, but rather, as Emmy said, it reflects where our profession has gone. And in order for any academic entering social work as a professor or applying for assistant professor positions, this kind of training is expected if one hopes to get a job at the top university and to get tenure, then, which is really kind of the next big step to be thinking about, is to get tenure, then you have to already have these skills that have been nurtured through your doctoral program. So I think NYU has really chosen a perspective that reflects where our profession has gone and moved toward sort of more rigorous science. And all that being said, I think about 70 or 80% of jobs, probably in academia and social work, are in teaching colleges and in small towns, and are at smaller universities that maybe aren't R1 universities. So all that to say, there's a lot of people that are going to be competing for a lot of jobs at the top, and there are a whole lot of jobs that go actually unfilled every year. And I'm on a couple of listservs where colleges have been posting for the 4th year. They have an assistant professor position in social work. And it's a small town in Iowa, and no one has ever sort of been hired there, and they keep having to hire sort of MSW folks to teach until they can get a full-time professor. And so all that to say, just as competitive as things are at the top, there's a whole big sort of system underneath, or I shouldn't say underneath, that maybe operates in some ways separately or different from that. So, yeah.
I'm going to answer both your questions at the same time by saying that academia is a very weird place. I don't know how much you're familiar with the culture of academia, and people, it can be very cutthroat and backstabbing, and there can be a lot of negatives to it. And then there's all the positives that outweigh that, which is why so many people want to go into it. So the flexibility, the stimulation, there's so many things, but everybody has to figure out the trade-off and whether they want that or not. I think that that's been one of the biggest frustrations for me, is having to fight your way through some of that. Sometimes I've had some complex relationships with faculty here, but it's all been doable and something that can be navigated if you like this enough, to get through it. But it is its own culture and carries with it its own challenges. Something to be mindful of.
Okay. So just so we can make sure everyone can get to class on time, I'm going to do one more question, and then I'm sure our panelists will stick behind for a few minutes to answer more direct questions. But basically, my last question is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to, say, a graduating MSW student who has dreams of pursuing a doctoral degree in social work?
I would say if you're, do your homework and get involved. When I was in my MSW, I got heavily involved with professors in doing research, knock on their doors, send emails, and because sometimes they have, it might open other doors. So I think for me, that was really helping me kind of streamline and kind of refine my research interests and ideas, and take. For me, it's an investment. It is an investment. So, like any investment, just write your pros and cons, and take the time to make sure that a PhD is the best way to serve your professional goals. I hear a lot of times people saying, "Oh, I'm just going to PhD because I like school, or the economy is bad, and like it's 4 more years of school." But it is a huge financial and emotional investment, because it's 5 years if you're on fast track, like a few more years if you're not. So treat it with a lot of care and thoughtfulness when you're doing that research process to apply.
I would say take a little bit of time off, perhaps, from your master's program, but not too much time. As I think about my cohort, like most of us were in our 30s, a couple of the students were in their 40s, had been at school mostly 10, 15, 20 years. And as I think about the cohorts that have come in the last couple of years, students are pretty sort of newly out of their MSW program. And I think, again, that reflects changing priorities within academia, within social work. And less value is placed on practice and more value is placed on research. So if you wait 10 years like I did, when you get into stats class, you're going to be like, what is all of this? Like, I know I took stats classes in undergrad and master's program, but I don't remember any of this. This was 10 years ago. So I would say that probably for a lot of programs, one of the features of an ideal candidate is that someone who's been out of their master's just a couple years and who is seen as being closely allied with academia and research and is able to jump right back in to where they had picked up, but now they have a little bit of practice knowledge to take with them.
I agree with both you guys. I would say do your research, write your apps to specific people at the specific schools you're interested in. That's how I got funded. We weren't funded the first 2 years when I got here, and I got fully funded because I did just that. And be very proactive about everything. Nothing's going to get handed to you on a silver platter. And make contacts within your MSW program. So I have professors from my MSW program that I still talk to at conferences and do work with and use for references. And I was like, oh, I'm never going to have to see this person again. I'm done. And then I'm applying for NIH funding right now, and I need like 6 references or something like that. And I have to go back to people years and years back. So it's much easier if you maintain those contacts, and you never know who's going to be able to help you along the way.
Great. Thank you so much.